Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz from Israel 365 News, coming at you live from the Golan where all the fun is. Today, I have two amazing guests, Luke Hilton, who's the media director for Hayovel, and Josh Waller, who's the director of operations for Hayovel. Hayovel is a nonprofit organization that brings Christian volunteers from all over the world to serve the Jewish farmers in Israel, and that is truly prophecy coming down right in front of our eyes. Luke and Josh recently did a video that really made me stand up and take notice. They went into a couple of Palestinian villages just to see what it was like, the real truth. And what they found, and the video is amazing, is they actually showed that the majority, in some cases, the vast majority of the apartments are empty, unoccupied.
And we're going to show a short clip.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
Okay, guys, this morning we're going to go bust some leftist myths. Bust some leftist myths. We're up here early because we're going to run into a bunch of Arab villages.
A couple weeks ago, one of our shows, we talked about a Peace Now report that said one of the reasons the Palestinians build in Area C is because they have a basic need for shelter. We're going to go look at Arab Palestinian houses and buildings all over Samaria. And we're going to see how many people are actually living here. We're going to get some facts along the way. We're going to get some actual shots. We're going to try and go on location.
Check this out.
So they went into these Arab villages, no CGI involved. And in this age of the internet, seeing is believing. You have to see the video, and they just lay it all out. They weren't so beautifully received. So whichever one of you, I don't know. What was the myth you were trying to bust, and what was the truth?
Yeah, so I can jump in there. Josh and I have a show called the Joshua and Caleb Report that we do every week. And normally we have a studio here in Israel where we do like a 25-minute show every week, and specifically centered around Judea and Samaria and the heartland, telling the stories and the news and the prophetic events, things that are happening here. But about a month ago, we got a comment on one of our shows because we had mentioned the fact that if you come to Judea and Samaria, you'll notice that a lot of the buildings and houses are empty. And we had mentioned that fact, and someone left a comment on our show and said, instead of just talking about that, why don't you show us on film to prove it? And so that, I think, is what sparked the original idea of, we said, hey, why not? We're here. We have a film crew. We can do this. So it was actually, to be honest, a very unplanned, unorganized trip. It was the day leading up to Purim here in Israel. We jumped in the car at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and we went to Rawabi, which is the brand new Palestinian town that's like they're building it like a crazy American town in Samaria. And then we also went to a place called Turmis Aya. But we wanted to show up close and personal the facts on the ground. The first myth that we set out to bust was the fact that there is a housing crisis for the Palestinians, and that is the reason that they're building in Area C when they should actually only be building in areas A and B. And because Peace Now, left-wing NGO, did a report recently saying that the Palestinians have a need for basic shelter, and that's one reason why they're illegally building in Area C. And we knew that's not true. So we decided, this is a myth that needs to be busted. And by the end of the day, we also busted a myth that all Palestinians live in poverty, because we ended up in a village called Turmis Aya, which is near Shiloh, just north of Jerusalem. And the homes in this Arab village are just mansions. It's some people call it the Hollywood of the West Bank, because there's just so many homes. And we literally drove straight into the village. The first person that we saw, we stopped, talked to him. Unfortunately, he did not want to be filmed, but we sat with him for about an hour and got his story. This man was born in Tur Messiah. He had served in the Jordanian military before 1967. He went to Puerto Rico, opened his own supermarket, lived in Puerto Rico for 25 years, I think, and then came back to Tur Messiah in Judea and Samaria. And most of it, I think 7 out of his 11 children live in the United States or South America right now. But he told us 90% of the village is empty because everyone lives overseas. And all
Okay, look, I have to stop you there because what you're saying, I understand it, but to the average person, it would not make sense. Why would someone build an apartment, buy an apartment, and leave it empty? What's the reason? I mean, they paid for it. It's money, right? So, do we have an answer?
I'm gonna let you jump in here.
Why would they build?
Yeah.
First of all, okay, go for it. Why would they build these apartments and not live in them?
Well, yeah, you definitely know the answer, Eliyahu, and it's called a land grab. There's really good reason for Arabs to be buying apartment buildings. There's actually whole industries here. There's one just to mention, if somebody wants to Google it, it's called Taba. It's an organization. I think a lot of Americans that are Arabs, they come and they just buy up land. And they want to buy land. It fits the Arab narrative that says that that this is the way that they conquer the land of Israel from the Jews. Is you build on every area that you can possibly build on, and just like a Jewish farmer goes out and he plants a vineyard, right? He's filling Torah commandments to plant a vineyard, to go out and settle the land of Israel. Well, on the other side, you actually have Arabs trying to take over the land of Israel, one actually brick at a time, one house at a time. And this is their narrative. They want to take over the land of Israel, and they know they can do it by literally concrete trucks. They can literally take pieces of the land of Israel by building homes on it. So this is the reason why you would have an empty apartment building.
And it's very easy to do this. It's a painless form of patriotism or whatever you want to call it from their side, since they're not paying for it. I used to drive around. I'd see all these beautiful multi-story build houses and apartments with no windows. And I never understood it until someone explained to me that they get paid by the EU, by the European Union, by European countries, by left-wing NGOs that are saying they're humanitarian, pro-Palestinian. They build these apartments and they only have to pay taxes after the apartment is completed. So they don't finish them. So they actually, as a Palestinian, you'd be like, okay, so I own this apartment, but I don't have to pay taxes on it till it's finished. So there's a huge monetary incentive. And the real pity is that, I mean, I put myself in the place of these, if I was exactly as I am now, except Palestinian, they can't sell them. A Palestinian who sells an apartment to a Jew or any land or anything to a Jew like that, property, it's a capital offense under the Palestinian Authority. They are dragged out of their houses, tortured, killed, whatever. It has happened. But so they build these things and they can't sell them. But it's like free money for them.
Another myth that has been dispelled during the show was that they live in poverty, which many people, whenever you look at CNN, they're not going to show you pictures of Ramallah or the mansions of Messiah that they went to. They're going to show you the densely populated refugee camps in the Gaza Strip. But just to give you just one other little clip of what we're talking about over here, it should open your eyes up.
Again, because the town where they
I want to add one other point to what you guys are saying. We just you got a clip there. Okay, go for it.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, I just want to add to this. You're talking about the buildings. They actually, I just learned this from another Jewish friend, that they actually take. How do they take the census, right? So there's big arguments over how many Arabs there are actually here. How many Palestinian Arabs? Is there 1.5 million or is there 3 million? Now, it's said that it's understood that the UN, when they come in to take the census, to know how many Arabs are on the list to give money out to, they're actually taking the census by buildings, apartment buildings. So this is another big potential. I haven't fact checked it myself, but there's another potential for what's going on.
I'm going to show this clip of the
we didn't even
apartments.
start out to bust is that all Palestinians live in abject poverty, which is, well, let's speak for themselves. Yeah, the Palestinians, obviously, yes, there's Palestinians living in poverty, but many of them not whatsoever.
Luke, and I just remember we actually busted a third myth.
Okay.
Wow.
So
nice house.
I wouldn't complain if someone gave me one of those houses. Yeah.
I remember.
Hey, according to the prophets, maybe you can claim it.
Sure, Luke.
Well, I was just gonna say. So there's two places we went during the show, and also we stopped at another random village we didn't even know. We took footage, and about 80 to 90% of the houses that we saw in one air village were empty. But the village that was just shown in that clip is Tur Messiah, which is one of the wealthier villages. Most of the people live in South America and the United States. These are their summer vacation homes, but they're mansions. They're 4 or 5 stories, balconies, gold, domed roofs, all kind of crazy stuff. But we also went to a city called Rawabi, which is being built by a Palestinian American businessman. And this town is being built for 40,000 people, and the apartment buildings are 20 stories tall. We drove into Rawabi, which has been supposed to be open. Like the apartments are for sale and ready to be moved into for quite a while now. We drove into this place, which is like 80% finished and totally open for people to move in. And literally, we would drive by one apartment building and we would count like 2 porches that had a towel hanging over the rail, and we would count 1 car here, 1 car there, and literally there was like maybe a few hundred people living in this town that's built for 40,000, and it's totally affordable. People say, well, Palestinians can't afford an apartment there. The apartments start at $60,000 US dollars. They start there. They go about 200,000. Completely affordable. So it's definitely not a housing crisis. It's the complete opposite. There's not Palestinians to move into these apartments.
There's a third myth that you didn't even talk about, but you talked around, which is you were talking about the UN census, how they take a census in the Palestinian towns in Judea and Samaria, but there's also the problem with the UN. They say that there are something like 5 million Palestinian refugees, but they're counting Palestinians, the refugees from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation, because a refugee is defined as a person who was forced to leave their home because of various reasons, war, political persecution, and that does not include this generation. According to the UN, there is an organization in the UN that deals with refugees, and there's a separate organization that deals with Palestinian refugees. The definition of a regular refugee from anywhere else in the world is a person who was forced to flee, but not his children. And if he finds a country he can live in, then he loses his refugee status. The Palestinians, for some reason, the UN has turned this into a multi-generational, without any end limit, refugee status. So here we have these Palestinian towns. People actually have homes in these towns, and they'll be considered refugees.
There's no other precedent. There's no other precedent in history of someone being a refugee over 70 years after a conflict. This is something that is unprecedented, and we only see it here in Israel. And that just shows the bias and the disproportional view that the United Nations takes to Israel and to this conflict.
So you're seeing all these empty.
They also
apartments.
took notes from Chicago. They also don't take them off the list once they're dead. You find this kind of stuff in Chicago, right? So that you said it's an endless thing. So that you also find those kind of stats on there as well. Once you're on the list, it's basically an eternity.
It's funny because by their definition, I'm a Palestinian refugee. Okay. Going way back. Okay. But you go into these villages and you see empty houses, beautiful houses, and what's going on. And it's all being funded. Like I said, it's free money. If I could build an apartment and get paid to do it and then not have to pay taxes on it, gosh, I'd have several apartments. Are there any other myths that you notice? Also, I want to say I used to live in Gush Etzion. I used to hitchhike to work, which was fairly common, and we lived amongst the Palestinians. I used to sit there. Oh my gosh, there was this one contractor. We had the same schedule. He would drive by me every morning. He had a Cadillac pickup truck, literally. I mean, this thing, and he'd go by and I'd just be like, whoa, and we would laugh, But there, okay, yes, there are poor Palestinians, but to give over this narrative that seems to say they're all poor is absurd. And it's literally contrary to what you showed in your video.
Were you not? I have a question. Were you not afraid to do this? Because just as a disclaimer, this is not something you should do yourself at home. This is something which, in fact, you two had a show, I think, a month ago, in which you showed a Jewish and Israeli jogger. It was running through and accidentally ran into an Arab village and was beaten, and thank God he wasn't killed. But there have been lynchings, and if somebody
just happened last week in East Jerusalem.
If somebody were to mistaken you guys for being Jewish, you're driving around with yellow license plates, asking questions, you could have really been in danger. Did you feel it at any time in danger?
What do you think, Luke? I didn't feel too endangered. I think you might have felt a little more. You might have had your sensible hat on more than I did. But what do you think, Luke?
Yeah, Josh is definitely more of a risk taker than I am. But we specifically went at 5 o'clock.
Josh's are like
in the morning because we wanted to see what it was like early in the morning. It's definitely a lot easier then. But to be honest, we drove past one red sign on the way to Rawabi and drove through a lot of Palestinian villages. But once we got to Rawabi is a place that's open. You don't have to even go past the red sign to get there. We did get kicked out by this local security, but they were actually super, super friendly. The security guy actually tried to get us an interview with one of the officials from Rawabi, and when they told him no and that we had to leave and we couldn't film anymore, he was super apologetic, wasn't he, Josh?
Yeah, he was pretty nice guy, but I think I used my 2 Arabic words on him, and he thought it was great, so we became friends. But I think that was our concept was to go in. If they only knew what we actually do, then yeah, we might be, Luke. There might be reason to be a little bit more careful. But going in, looking American, playing the American part, and our goal is to go make a few buddies. And, going in and finding a good coffee shop and trying to, ask a few questions here and there and see where we could get to. Literally, it led us to the mayor of the town. And so there was only one time, Luke, where it got a little bit funny. It's when we walked into the mayor's office and the PA guard was there. And he asked me, he said, "Now tell me your name again." And I told him my name was Joshua. And he said, "Wait." And it got serious there for a minute. He's like, "That's Jewish." And Luke, I was like, I said, "Come on." I said, every other person in Tennessee's name's Joshua. What are you talking about? And Luke's like, it's a Christian name too. Like, whatever. And so, yeah, they almost got really worried that we were Jewish because my name was Joshua. But
okay, so myth number 4 and myth number 5. You mentioned those red signs. Okay, anyone who says that Israel is an apartheid, that is also the opposite of the truth. Why? Because I've prayed next to Arabs at the Kotel, next to Muslims at the Kotel, next to Christians at the Kotel, next to the Cardinal of India at the Kotel, at the Western Wall. But Jews are not permitted into, right, there you go, Josh. Jews are not permitted into Arab villages, into the Palestinian Authority. And not only are we not permitted, but we're really taking our lives into our hands. That's myth number 4. Myth number 5 is, I don't know if you would call this a myth, but yeah, that was dangerous for you. But I know that you guys, when you go up to the Temple Mount, the Waqif guards are nastier to you than they are to me, because yeah, they hate Jews. But as soon as they find out that Christians love Israel and love the Jews and support, the holiness, the sanctity of the land, then they're worse with you than they are with us even.
The only thing worse than a Jew is a foreigner that supports Jews. That's a no-no.
So, I mean, I would not.
Thankfully, they're not because of Corona and this whole year, Luke. I think we've got a specific window of time here where these towns have not had a lot of media, so they're loving the opportunity that somebody was coming. If they thought for 2 seconds, they could have realized that. Obviously, we're from Israel because nobody's been able to enter the country for over a year. So, how did we get there? So thankfully, they didn't think too hard about it. But you know what? Growing up, since I was 14, here in Judea and Samaria, in Judea and Samaria, you know what? I don't really, being around the Arab communities, watching the rock throwings, the Arabs come out of their towns with other, I'm really, not super scared of them. It's not, I sense that they're actually more afraid, than they are, they have this aggressive, feel about them, but once you actually touch it, they back up. And I see it time after time after time. And when Israel is strong, the Arabs are weak. When Israel backs down, the Arabs strengthen themselves. But they're only going off of what they sense and they feel from Israel. So when that's just, it's not very American of me to say this, but my growing up here and being in the Jewish communities and witnessing how the Arabs relate, I think actually help us when we go into these towns. Growing up, I actually used to break horses, and if you are afraid of a horse, when you got on its back, the horse would throw you. The horse will throw you almost every time. If you jump on that horse's back and you're confident and you're secure and you're in charge, they respect it and they go with it. So not to say the Arabs are exactly like horses, obviously human beings, but they're very sensitive and they relate. They relate this way. And if you're confident and you're secure and you know what you're doing, there's almost a respect for it. And so I think that's a little bit of our motive when we go in, not to completely blow our cover, that we're pro-Israel and staunch Israel supporters. And if they knew our real story, Luke, they would have kicked us out, I'm sure. But at the same time, we want to be very confident and go in but yeah, I don't really fear the worst. I guess, I don't know. Joe Biden is like our biggest cover up now, we got Biden behind. Now, if Trump was in, I think it would actually be a worse story. We'd get more questions. But now that Biden's in, we can, we could say, America, they love that. Most of these guys are literally getting their Social Security from America. Literally 95% of the town that we went into was getting their Social Security straight off of American Social Security. So, they love the Bidens.
Oh my gosh. I remember, you guys are young.
Understand. Being as a Jewish person, you wouldn't go in there as a Jew. You
no.
just couldn't do it.
Oh no. Really not. And I remember though, you guys are youngins, but I moved to Israel in 91. And I remember before Oslo.
When I was born.
Okay. Ouch.
I joined the IDF in 91, so.
Okay. And we used to be able to we used to go into Arab villages. There were Arab villages that did a great business. Restaurants, coffee shops. You said you were looking for a coffee shop in there. Arab coffee, great stuff. This is going to sound really racist, but back in the day, there were no Jewish auto mechanics because everyone took their cars to the Arab auto mechanics. They were better. They were better mechanics, and they had better prices. And you would go in, you drop your car off, you'd go out, have a cup of coffee or something, and then come back and pick up your car. Oslo, the peace process, destroyed that. And as a matter of fact, when you were saying that the guy didn't want to be filmed, one of the things they're afraid of is that the Palestinian Authority has what they call the anti-normalization. Anti-normalization is normal people living together, people doing business together. Anti-normalization is you cannot coexist with Jews.
And Elio, if you remember, it actually, I believe it hurt the Arabs as much, if not much more, than it hurt us. And if you look at, remember,
way more.
The tomb of Rachel, there didn't used to be a giant prison wall up next to the tomb of Rachel, and it was open. It was in the middle of Bethlehem, and all the Arab stores there basically were funded by Jewish tour buses that would pull up, and they would buy stuff from all these different Arab stores, and then they put up this giant wall, and that was the end of their economy.
Bethlehem is a ghost town, because the Christians there are treated horribly.
The few that are left.
The few that are left. The population is dwindling, and yes, it is. They are anti-coexistence, and I'm sorry, coexistence is how you live. It's how you feed your kids. It's how you get your kids to learn, to go to school. And the Palestinian Authority has an active and ruthless anti-normalization movement. If you think about it, people who say, "Oh, I'm pro-Palestinian," yes, you're anti-coexistence, you're anti-peace, and that's really, let's call a spade a spade. Anyone who is pro-Palestinian, as they call it, is anti-coexistence, and I think that's another thing that your film graphically illustrated. If you go there, there is no fence around the Arab villages you visited. If you go to a Jewish village, just very, very nearby, there are fences around them. Why? Because they know we're not going to go in and hurt them. But the opposite is not true. That's another myth. Myth number 6.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, true. We have a lot more myths to bust in the future. We have a lot more shows to
I can't wait to see it. I love it, but don't do this again. Okay. I know you guys are from Tennessee. I know you guys are like, I wish I had one of those hats, you know. You put on the hats and you have your cup of coffee and you go rock and roll, but it is a dicey thing. It is very scary to go. I wouldn't go into those villages. And I used to, but I won't anymore.
Yeah, let me I got to tell you this, but in the IDF you did, right?
Yes.
In the IDF you go into the Arab villages, right?
Yes.
That's just where the IDF go. That's the spot one. Okay, so when I was 18 here, because you're right, I came here when I was 14, right? So I turned 18. A lot of my friends that I'd known in the Yeshuvim and all around, what were they doing? They're going to the IDF. And so Luke and I both, we were like, and I've got 6 brothers, and so all the 6 brothers, they're all like, all right, we're gonna try to volunteer. We're gonna go to the IDF. We want to fight in the IDF. We want to fight for Israel, right? But guess what? As a foreigner, you can't fight in the IDF. It's just not one of those things you can do. The IDF is for Israelis, and that's the way it is. And to a very, very rare exception. And so we said, okay, what do we do? And we said, you know what? There's some things that Israelis can't do, and that's what we want to do. We're going to fill those shoes. We're going to fight the best we can with what we can, and with the talents we have, we want to give that. We want to act like soldiers. If it's planting vineyards, we're going to strap our boots on. We're going to put as many vines in the ground as we can in the land of Israel. If it's planting trees, it's the same way. If it's putting in security roads, it's the same. We're gonna put our back into it as best we can. Now, if it's breaking anti-Israel myths that are going around the world, this is where we seriously have to put our army boots on. We're strapping on these boots because this propaganda is hurting Israel, and there's good people out there that are being misinformed about the truth of what's happening in Israel. And once again, this is where we can strap on our boots. It may not be the easiest thing, But this is a huge issue that the world has to know the truth. And there's a lot of propaganda, and there's a lot of people who want to hear the propaganda. There's also a lot of people who want to just know the flat truth. And when we can go with the camera, next time, we hear about Eliyahu, I want you to tell me, next time you hear about some Jewish group uprooting Arab olives, call me, because I want to actually see it. I don't think it actually happened. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to find those stumps. Okay. I'm going to find those stumps, and I'm going to ask you if it's actually true. You know what? It's a big myth. It happens over and over again. Eliyahu, Jews won't chop down trees. It's against the Torah. It says when you go into the land not to chop down the trees.
Not only that, do you guys do olives? Do you do olive trees?
Oh yeah, I've picked
so
a ton of olives.
So you have olive. How many times have you driven past an olive orchard and it's chopped down? It's not chopped down. That's how you trim an olive tree. Olive trees, you got to do some pretty aggressive pruning every couple years. Otherwise, you're not going to have olives.
No, but the Jewish settlements have been known to have been targeted by Arabs, and then when they chop it down, they actually cut it at the root, which actually destroys the tree, and it takes many years for it to grow back to its previous glory. So it's something that is done, unfortunately, and but it's usually done in the opposite direction that you hear of.
Also, okay,
exactly.
So you made 2 points. One is, I'll tell you something. I moved to Bahrain. I'm going back more than 20 years, and back then, they would be accusing Jews of things that didn't happen, but eventually it did start to happen, because you see enough of your friends killed. You see enough of the horrible stuff. It's going to go in and it's going to affect you. And the younger generation, I do see these kids. They throw rocks, not nearly as much as it's reported. And there is, because it's one of the few pieces of ammunition that the left wing in Israel can use, they push it forward. Strangely enough, as horribly anti-Israel as it is. And as you pointed out, in the other direction, what we call agricultural terrorism, it happens an awful lot. And I know when I lived in Bahrain, Kfar Zion had a lot of orchards, and it was all they have to do is burn. They just have to throw in some flammables, and you've got a problem. So that's also.
Oh yeah, I just read today. I believe that it's agricultural terrorism is up in 2020. It was up 58% as it was last year, I believe. So this is a serious issue now. Which is crazy. But Josh, to your point as well.
Didn't you guys get some trees? You guys had trees destroyed?
Yeah, we had trees ripped up. Yeah. It was just another one of those things where we get to identify more with the Jewish people and the struggle to settle the land. So it's an honor. It's an honor to walk in those shoes. If it's going to happen to Jews, let it happen to us. We need to feel the same pain. We need to be able to fight the same fight.
It's a blessing. May you be blessed. You guys are awesome. I'm blessing you night and day. I really am.
You know what? Of course, there's knuckleheads out there that are going to do bad things on both sides. And like Josh was mentioning, there have been a few olive trees, I'm sure, that were cut down by some 16-year-olds. 16-year-olds don't have a lot of sense. That's just pretty common. And I'm sure that happens sometimes. But the propaganda is what Luke and I are going to fight against. When something is posted out there as though it's true, and it's just not, it's fabricated, they're going to turn a little molehill into a mountain, right? That's when we're going to call it out. When they bring stuff like this building, literally, Peace Now, Luke, they published it. They said the Arabs are having a building crisis because they're not allowing Israel to build in Area C. All right, Luke, what did we do with that? We said that's a bunch of baloney. They're not. There's buildings going up all over the place. Okay, so that's where we're going to step in and we're going to say, okay, guys, now look, there's an empty town. If somebody needs housing, you can buy an apartment building for $60,000. Okay, that's as cheap as dirt. You can't find apartment buildings that cheap anywhere else. Okay, if you want to build a house, concrete in the Arab villages is like it's also cheap as dirt. People can build, and they are building, and you see it. So many empty houses. So it's just a bunch of hogwash that says that there's a building crisis. Just not happening. So that's where the Joshua and Caleb Network, the Joshua and Caleb report, we're going to go in and bust these myths.
Have you sent your report to any government officials in the United States or the European Union, for that matter, that might be sympathetic to listening to the truth?
I don't know if that's a good idea or not. With the current administration, I don't know, Luke.
Yeah,
we were targeted by
those that are sympathetic. I'm not sending it not to send it to the Biden administration, but there are congressmen that are on our side, and I think that perhaps opening their eyes to these kind of things might be beneficial.
I don't know.
The Obama administration was very hostile towards our work. Literally, the New York Times posted and said that Hayovel was effectively obstructing the creation of a Palestinian state. And so I don't know. We may see the same kind of. I'm guessing we're going to see the same results when it comes to the Biden administration.
Worse.
What?
Worse.
Yeah, I'd say it's going to be worse. But actually, you know what? There's still hundreds of thousands of Americans that support Israel. And it doesn't really matter what the current administration does. It's only going to push the work forward. Because you know what? The more they persecute it, the more they try to take our 501c3 status out. The more they try to bash us. It's as long as they spell our name right, they're just they're putting. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Glick said. You know what? As long as they spell your name right, it's just promotion. The New York Times article that said we were effectively obstructing the creation of a Palestinian state. Hey, you know what? That's probably one of the better news articles that ever came out. We wanted to put that poster all over.
I was just going to say, you should hang it on the wall. Frame it and hang it on the wall.
There's actually an active industry, what we call Pallywood. And Pallywood is basically what you guys are doing, except for the Palestinians and totally based on lies. There was actually an article, a woman who was making quite a career out of doing makeup for Pallywood. But of course, the makeup she was doing was fake wounds, just making it look like people were hurt. She made a nice living. I think there was this one, going way, way back, there was this news report they showed an Israeli soldier, and it looked like he was beating up a bloody young Palestinian man. And then it turned out the real story was the IDF soldier happened to have been a Druze, and he was protecting a young Jewish boy who had just been attacked in Jerusalem. That was the active propaganda against Israel is shameless. It's shameless.
When Joshua and Luke were just in diapers, I was reporting in Ramallah. Here's a picture, and I remember how they would be waiting for the signal. They would all be waiting for the signal, and then as soon as the reporters all showed up, all the cameramen showed up at the scene. All of a sudden, everything would they would be stoning. They would have this made up riot just for the cameras. And then as soon as the cameras turned the other way, that was it. They all went home. It was literally made up for the cameras.
I literally saw that. I was serving at the DCO in Ramallah the last year that Yasser Arafat was alive, and he was in Ramallah. And we were sitting there in this IDF base in the heart of Ramallah, and all of a sudden you see all the people joining. Nothing was happening. They just all started coming out of their houses and gathering at this one spot. And my officer said to me, "Get ready, there's going to be a riot." And I'm like, "So what should I do?" He said, "Nothing. It's just for the cameras." I'm like, "What?" And literally, they showed up, and there was one IDF armored Jeep with 4 soldiers. And these guys, I give them a lot of credit. 3 guys, very calm, very collected, rubber bullets and gas. And there was a telephone pole, and there was one old guy standing behind the telephone pole yelling at the young guys, "Okay, you go there, you pick up those rocks." And I couldn't believe it, because I was a medic. I had a lot of respect for the Palestinian medics, and I would really try to connect to them, and I saw the ambulance. it would go out, open up the back, put young men into the thing, and I literally watched it drive back behind a building, open its doors, and the same young guys got out and went right back to throwing rocks. I saw it in front of my eyes. And like you said, they set up. Half an hour later, the reporters showed up. Went on for about half an hour. Reporters left. Everyone went home. It's like, so what was that about? It was a statement. I guess, I don't know. They wanted to get, they needed to rile up the press or something. I don't know. But you guys are doing,
unfortunately, Eliyahu, that's what sells.
That's what sells.
That's the kind of media that sells.
Yep. But there's
We
a
got to
saying
change the narrative.
there's a saying in Hasidus, a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. So there's a lot of lies, a lot of darkness out there. You guys, all you have to do is have your morning coffee, get in your car, and go, and you can dispel a lot of darkness, a lot of lies with a little bit of just, let me show you what's happening. That kind of truth. So let people look at it, make up their own minds. And I think that can dispel a lot of this darkness. It's so blatantly a lie. It doesn't even make sense that a little bit of light, a little bit of truth, bang, it's gone. I think God willing. Oh.
And I want to say too, I think we see that as really a big part of our mission, because something that I didn't expect after we put out the show last week was the number of Jews and Israelis that reached out to us saying, you guys did something that we really can't do.
Right.
Right. Thank you for showing this. And that kind of made me realize, because we are American Christians, we're here in Israel. It's something, and yeah, we got to be careful at what we're doing, but it's something that we can do, and we can show the world. And to put it into perspective, the last stat I heard is that there's 300 left-wing NGOs that are funding the Palestinian propaganda and illegal buildings in Judea and Samaria. There's one that I know of, maybe there's two, I don't know, right-wing NGOs. So, and the same is true with the media and the amount of fake news and negativity coming out of these places. If it's YouTube, if it's Instagram, Facebook, social media, whatever it is, it's 100 to 1 of the fake news that's coming out of Israel, and specifically Judea and Samaria. So I think whatever light we can shed on what's actually happening here, we feel like that's a huge mission for us.
And unfortunately, you're absolutely correct that it's not something I could do. I remember there was this video that was going around. There were these, it showed this Palestinian boy crouching next to one of those big concrete barriers, and he was stuffing bread through the barrier, through a hole in the barrier that was like this big. He's stuffing bread, and there was another little boy on the other side picking it up. And the camera happened to pan a little bit to the side, and I'm like, I know that site. It's right near my house, and it's a half a mile away from the Rami Levy supermarket in Gush Etzion that serves both Jews and Arabs. So, and here they're making it seem like, oh, they're stuffing rolls through the hole in the wall, and it was such a lie. And I said something, and someone said, oh no, if you live there, so you're a settler. You probably served in the IDF, so you're a war criminal. So we don't have to listen to you. You're telling a lie. And I remember there was this group of what do you call the group? Taglit. How do you say it in English? The Birthright. And they do a beautiful thing. They bring Jews to Israel who have never been here, which I've seen eyes opened up to a new definition of what Judaism is. And there was a group that came here and they protested. They said, they're not showing us the real Israel. We're traveling around and we're not seeing the real Israel. We know what Israel is about because we learned about it in university. And they're not showing us the real thing because they're not showing us the oppression. They're trying to hide the oppression from us. And I'm like, this is what you are seeing. You're seeing with your own eyes and you won't accept it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that people just will not, they would rather, they're so stuck in the narrative that even when the truth is shown to them, right in front of their own eyes, sometimes they can't even see it. So you guys have your work cut out for you. You would think it's easy enough to just like, here's the truth, but no. I think there are a lot of people who, even when they see it, they won't accept it.
That's actually a serious problem with birthright. There's something called extenders, which means that after you finish the birthright program, you're able to extend your trip for another 10 days, and you're able to do basically whatever you want. And a lot of times, after having done birthright and being turned on to all the positive things about Israel, many of the birthrighters are approached by Arabs, and they're told, you know what, and this plays right into their American backgrounds. They say, you know what, you heard the Israeli narrative, you heard their truth. Now, why don't you want to be fair? You should hear the other side. And for the last 10 days of their trip, they go around and hear propaganda from the Palestinians, and then they go back not being more pro-Israel, but actually being more anti-Israel than when they came.
Do you guys think that Israel's bad at public relations?
We're doing our part. We're doing everything we can to help out.
You would think that Israel would have this under control.
I guess they've had a few more things to worry about, like survival and like establishing a nation and things like that. So
I'd like to address that. I think that if you look at Israel's history, you'll see that they made a huge mistake by believing that if the truth is on their side, that they don't have to have public relations, because we're telling the truth, so we don't really need to prove it to anyone. And that was one of the biggest mistakes, because meanwhile, the Palestinians created an entire mythical nation, a whole narrative which is accepted by the world. They did an incredible job of selling people on this propaganda. And Israel just sat back and said, the truth is on our side. And they've been recently doing a lot better, but they're very late to the game. I think that this has really hurt Israel's image over the years.
Well, put this on your calendar. I actually totally agree with Josh. Okay. I think that probably is the case.
You also mix that with a little bit of Jew hatred. I don't like to call it anti-Semitism. Let's call it what it is. People don't know what that means. You mix that with Jew hatred, and that's, I think, what we're dealing with. It's a lot easier to believe somebody else than it is to believe Jews when you already have Jew hatred in your heart. And unfortunately, it's a disease that most of the world struggles with. And it's something that we really have to just like we're battling Corona, you know what? We need to battle this disease of Jew hatred around the world that accepts propaganda, because there already is like a garden ready for it to grow in. They're already like primed and ready for it. And so that's also something that we're battling against, is that those international garden is basically primed and ready just to receive anti-Israel propaganda as truth based on their narrative. So this is also something that we're really trying to fix. It's a big fixing that has to be done in the international community.
I'm glad you said it, so I didn't have to. But that's also a statement
that's why I'm here, Eliyahu.
I count on you guys, and thank God you haven't let me down yet. But yeah, I mean, Jew hatred, and I think you're absolutely correct. I find myself using that term more and more frequently lately. Jew hatred is the oldest form of racism in the world. It's probably the most widespread form of racism, and so it's almost the default situation. So, for example, the film you guys made, there's a clear double standard. If it was reversed, if there were Jewish towns that had massive amounts of empty apartments, I'm sure there would be a general outcry of, oh, can't you give that to some of the Palestinians who have trouble with housing? But that cry is not coming up. They're using that even as weapons against us. And even one of the bases, this is myth number 7, if we said, okay, I mean, I would love to buy one of those apartments. I'm not allowed. Why?
Right.
Because I'm Jewish. Because I'm Jewish. Just because I'm Jewish. Whenever people talk about the two-state solution, I always want to ask them, so where else are Jews going to be forbidden from living? You're telling me that Jews are forbidden from living in Gaza. They're forbidden from living in a lot of Muslim majority Arab countries. But within Israel, Jews are forbidden from living in Gaza, which is inside Israel if you look at the map. You want to make it forbidden for Jews to live in Judea and Samaria. Where else are me and my children not allowed to go just because we're Jewish? I mean, that is Jew hatred. It's pre-Nazi Germany. And I hate using that analogy, but it fits. This is Judenrein. Where else are Jews not allowed to go? I mean, where do you want to? New Jersey? I'm not allowed to go to New Jersey because I'm Jewish? Or Dearborn, Michigan, which has a large...
You got the map wrong. When I was in the mayor's office in Mosiah, I saw the map of his so-called Palestine. And here's another big one, Luke. We got to do this one too. We got to tackle this another big myth here. When people say two-state outside of the Arab world, they're thinking two different areas, like one spot for Jews, one spot for Arabs. Eliyahu, you know this good and well. The mayor's map had absolutely no land for Jews on it. It had one big, and it's funny, it was the actually exact map of Israel. You don't know where he got those boundaries. You know why he had those boundaries? Because that's the boundaries where Jews are. That's created the map for Palestine. It's an actually exact anti-Jews. That when Arabs say two-state, there's absolutely not even one speck of honesty in it. It's one Arab state that will annihilate the Jewish state and drive them into the sea. That's the most westernized American that's getting his Social Security from America. His office, the mayor, the leader of this American Arab colony. This is what his map says. So anybody can argue with that all they want, but the actual news on the street is there's not an Arab in in these towns that has a different map. No, they don't have a different map. Their map is all of Israel. It's called Palestine, and they're the rulers of it, and there's not a Jew in it.
Well, there's a word for that map. It's called genocide, and we've been there.
That's exactly right.
We've come through the other side. I look at that map and I think of my children. And you have, that's why Rashida Tlaib, who's actually a congresswoman in the American government, and she has advocated from the river to the sea, which they say, it doesn't mean eliminating the Jews. It means freedom from the river to the sea. And I'm like, okay, the Arabs have freedom inside Israel, so you're lying. And she's also rejected the two-state solution. She's open about wanting the one-state solution, which most people totally misunderstand. The one-state solution is that map that you just showed me. The one-state solution is they don't want Israel to exist. And
I would like to point out one more thing. I have an organization that tries to bring Jews back to Israel, the ingathering of the exiles. And something which I hear over and over again is there's not enough room in Israel to support all the Jews from the world. Now, first of all, my gut reaction to that is obviously if God says that it's going to happen, it's going to happen regardless. But clearly, to me, anyone who says that has never been on a tour of where Luke and Joshua just toured. I mean, if you see all the empty buildings, all the apartments, and you just go and see all the empty land throughout Judea and Samaria, and that's not even talking about the extended biblical borders of Israel. We're talking about within the state of Israel today. There is plenty of land to house all the Jews in the world, should they choose to make it their home.
Okay, Luke, I have
Josh, we just pulled the stats on that. We literally just pulled the stats. Luke, you remember the stats? We just pulled them up on 2 weeks ago of the show.
Yeah, I'll give them to you quickly. Well, I'll give you the bottom line is that 60% of just Judea and Samaria, we're talking about Judea and Samaria, 60% of it is Area C, but the Jewish population only covers 2.5% of that landmass. So
Wow.
even in what people think is the West Bank, they think the Jews are taking over the West Bank, driving the Palestinians out. Palestinians actually take up way more than 50%. The Jewish people living in Judea and Samaria are taking up less than 3% of the land here.
Luke, I have a personal request. Please don't ever show me that map again. I will cry if I see that map again. It's deep. It is deeply disturbing. It's a plan for genocide, plain and simple. It is a plan for genocide, black and white, hanging on his wall. That's deeply. I have never. Well, okay, I can't say that.
Elio, clearly you've never been to my neighborhood, because if you go through the areas in eastern Jerusalem, you will find this same exact map all over the place. This is something which is sold in the Arab shuk, in the marketplace in the old city. This is not something that they hide in any way. This is not something that they're keeping under the table. They proudly they proudly display this everywhere.
I don't think there is a Jewish mayor in Israel, even in Bahrain, which was considered extremist, that would have a map like that eliminates all the Palestinians. Like I said, we're striving for coexistence, and anyone who isn't, and there are people out there, they're considered extremists that are not really tolerated. You can see that if an Arab kills a Jew, he gets a paycheck from the Palestinian Authority. If a Jew kills an Arab, he is treated by the law, by Israel. So there's not really a parallel. It's not tit for tat. It's not the same situation on both sides of the fence. But that map, that's a plan for genocide, plain and simple, hanging in a mayor's office. We're not talking about some extremist organization. And this is a man who spent a lot of time in America and whose constituents...
He has a degree from a university in Chicago.
Right. And a lot of his constituents, a lot of people, the majority of the people from that town are, if not American citizens, spending a lot of time in America. And they are pro-genocide. That's deeply disturbing. I'm
what's a little bit weird about this whole story, Elio, is that if you go right next door to the Jewish town of Shiloh, or Eli, you will find that there is a large percentage of American Jews that have moved to these settlements. So you have American Jews on one side, and you have American Arabs on the other side. And these are people that you would think would have learned how to be tolerant with each other in America. And indeed, they are generally tolerant to each other in America. But you come here to Israel, and they are clearly at war with each other.
It really does make me want to cry. Wow. Okay. We really have to end it here. This has gone on. Okay, I'm going to go somewhere and cry.
I'll end it good for you here on an uptick.
Please.
Okay. So the Harabites, right? The Temple Mount. I was just thinking, you were just describing what Israel's view is of Israel is actually a place for all the nations. And the more religious you are as a Jew, the more you believe that, because the prophets speak about the house of prayer for all nations. It doesn't say just the house of prayer for the Jews and nobody else allowed. The ultimate redemption story for the religious Jew, the most radical religious Jew. And I want everybody in the nations to hear this, because hopefully you've got a few people from the nations. The most radical religious, the longer the payos and the bigger the kippah, the more they believe this. Like, I want you to picture the most radical person you can think of. Okay, they think that the Temple Mount is to be a house of prayer for all nations. That's the radical Jewish, God-fearing, God-loving Israeli. They want the house of prayer to be for all nations, not just Jews going and praying in their little synagogue or in the temple in the ultimate. They want every nation to come there with them. And that's their ultimate picture of redemption in Israel. So Eliyahu, when you said there's a big difference, yeah, there's a huge difference. You're not wanting to genocide and kill everybody else in the world and be global dominators. No, you want everybody to come and pray with you. That's the Jewish concept. When Israel rules over the God-given land of Israel, it's actually, Eliyahu, it's actually a little bit bigger than this map. The Palestinians got their map wrong. It's actually slightly bigger. They're not going to be able to get rid of all the Jews in that area. It's just not happening. It's much bigger than that. But maybe, Lord willing, one day, these guys, they're going to have a light bulb moment, and they're going to realize, hey, you know what? Praying together with these people is going to end much better. Let's put the knives down. Let's put the swords up. Let's put the guns up, and let's submit ourselves to the God story. And that's going to be much better for them. They're going to realize, and guess what? There's an open door for that to happen. It's just the Bible narrative is that all nations are invited to come and pray with you. I think as one from the nations, that's the biggest honor, and that's one of the biggest reasons I love Israel. I love the Jewish people. I love the Temple Mount because I long for that day when I can pray with you, Eliyahu, there on the Temple Mount. What a day! Oh my gracious, would that be to stand together in that ultimate redemption? To be someone from the nations can go and pray just as the prophets foresaw it. So that to me is the ultimate, and that's what Israel wants. Is a place of prayer for all nations. So, Eliyahu, thank you for being here in the land of Israel, and thanks for having us on. And maybe one day, maybe in our days, right, when we can fulfill that this desire.
God willing. That's when you go back and get Caleb and drag him back here.
That's right.
I want him too.
Amen. That's right.
You're absolutely right. Thanks for helping me out with that one. If I think about the other stuff too much, then it really gets me down.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Thanks everyone for joining us. This has been Joshua Waller and Luke Hilton from Hayovel, going out, shedding light on the darkness and telling the truth. And that's really what we need these days, is more truth. Thanks for joining us.
Amen.
If you bless us, we got to bless you back. That's what's written. The directions on the box. We got to do that. And I'm happy to do that. Thank you all. And you all have an amazing day.
And talking about the IDF and the Army, we have a special message for you.
Oh,
stay tuned.
Gosh, right. Oh.
שלום לכם. שמי ברוך בן יגאל ואני אבא של לוחם סיירת גולני, עמית בן יגאל. בליל הסדר הזה ישאלו כל עם ישראל, מה נשתנה הלילה הזה? מה נשתנה הלילה הזה עבורי זה שעמית לא נמצא איתי, יהיה כיסא אחד ריק, כיסא אחד לכבודו של הבן שלי שלא נמצא כאן איתי. הבן היחיד שלי שהקדוש ברוך הוא נתן לי ונלקח ממני בי"ח אייר תש"פ. אני מבקש מכולם להשאיר כיסא אחד ריק לעמית. כיסא אחד שבו נזכיר לכולנו שיש לנו ערבות הדדית. כל ישראל ערבים זה לזה. הערבות ההדדית, עמית בשנה שעברה נלחם בשביל כולנו. כולנו נשאיר כיסא אחד ריק למען עמית. תודה רבה.